Welcome everyone to the next edition of the Care CEO Success Stories podcast. My name is Adam James of Spring Up PR, and I'm delighted to say that today we have as my guest Samantha Crawley. She is CEO of Bracebridge Care, which has 3 homes presently operating and 3 more, if not more, in the pipeline. Samantha will go into that in a little bit more detail, and it's going to be a really interesting episode today because Samantha is going to be talking about why care leaders also must demonstrate vulnerability. So this is going to be a really interesting episode. So make sure you turn off all those notifications and listen carefully and take notes. Before we get going, as I say, my name is Adam James of Spring Up PR, and what we do is we help care providers become famous and get the recognition they deserve, ultimately to help get more inquiries, particularly from self-funding families. And if you head over to springup-pr.com, you'll find a whole number of videos and webinars and tips and advice. So make sure you go and have a look at that. Now, this podcast episode itself, please go and have a look at previous episodes. There's around about 15 now. We've had some really great guests, big names, talking about everything from how to grow successful care providers from scratch to how to build teams, dream teams, and a whole lot more. So make sure you go and have a look at our previous episodes. Let's get straight into this episode. As I say, we have Samantha. So Samantha, why don't you start off by telling everyone a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
No problem. So I'm Samantha. Who I am a person who lives with a dream to create care homes that people are proud to live and work in. That literally goes through my veins. And I'm the CEO of Bracebridge Care. We're just registering 3 care homes currently to go live, and we have another 3 in the pipeline with more coming, as you say, Adam. Very clearly, there's more coming as well. But yes, it's been a really interesting year, really setting up this company, setting up from scratch, working on the right culture, working on getting the right people around us. It's been really exciting, and we're very excited to get going in the care world. Obviously, I've been around care for, gosh, way too long, lots of years, over 25 years now, in different places. So I was with Sunrise, I've been with Sanctuary, I've been with Anchor, Barchester. I've had great teachers along the way. Yeah,
fabulous. We were talking about just before we pressed record that you were at Excel for director there. So
yes, absolutely. I had a great time there. Still very much in touch with my Excel colleagues, and really fabulous place to work.
Good. Well, let's get stuck in. Tell me, Samantha, why care leaders also must demonstrate vulnerability? Why is it you wanted to focus on this particularly?
I think I love the way this podcast works, actually. I think thinking of the successes is quite interesting, isn't it? Because it's very rare in care that a success is a single person's ownership ever. I don't know if I could say ever, I have had this success. But from a personal leadership perspective, I think one of the things that have helped me to be successful is to stay real all the time. Stay real with everybody. And that also means admitting at times that the imposter syndrome is creeping in, and, that fear of somebody tapping you on the shoulder and coming along and saying, have I got the right person doing this job? We all feel that in all different roles all the time. I think having real honest conversations about that really helps newer leaders and people coming into leadership know that it's okay. It's okay to be a bit scared. It's okay not to know everything. And it's also okay to say, I don't know that I have all the answers here. And I think, when I first became a leader years ago, I had a really good leader working with me, and he taught me an awful lot. But mostly he taught me you can never know everything. You can never know everything. But there's a vulnerability in that, isn't there? And I think sometimes as leaders, we're looked upon to have all of those answers, whatever's going on, to have all of those answers. And I think for team members to know that actually I'm going to come to you for a lot of the answers because you know the answer, or family members or residents or professionals that are visiting, they tend to know the answers to things that we need to know the answers to. So building up a set of trusted people around you who actually are better at certain things than you are, and actually wanting those people working with you is really important. I think when I first, before I was in care, I managed hotels as well. And I had two different styles of leadership mentoring me at that time. And one was a gent who felt he couldn't be questioned at all. Whatever his decision was, that was the decision. And I saw a completely different side of another leader who would say, this is what I'm thinking. Tell me what you think. Tell me what you feel about that. And I saw the success level of the person who was engaging people and actually not afraid to say, you might have a better answer to me, do very, very well. I remember at the time asking, how do you do that? Because I thought, this is like when I'm much younger, 30 odd years ago, when I thought if you're a manager, you needed to know everything. And I remember saying to him, how do you do that? I thought you needed to know everything. And he was going, Samantha, the one thing you need to learn about leadership is you never know everything. Yeah. So from that on, I think that's where that comes from.
Yeah, and I think all of us can probably identify with having worked alongside those different leadership styles that you're talking about. I know which one I would prefer. That's who you're talking about. And I think obviously myself working with different CEOs and MDs and heads, you get to see different styles. And again, I know generally which one I prefer to work purely as a client, because as you're saying, that what I feel I've learned is that when you have this idea you don't know everything, and that actual fact you are seeking advice and help and guidance, then it does empower your team to start to make those decisions without you. Tell me what you think here. Sometimes even when you think you have in your own mind the right answer, but you like to just you tell me.
Yes. Absolutely. I completely agree. The team, I believe, I'm crazy about succession planning. And I mean crazy. So we've already got our first succession planning day booked in for Bracebridge for the end of the summer, because we'll have people who've started working in the care homes. We'll be able to look at where people are, etc., in the system. We cannot grow leaders unless we ask people what they think, what they feel, what is their feedback on X or Y. Leaders can only grow by being given the opportunity to give an opinion, to share an idea, to really feel proud of what they have come up with, because ultimately confidence is huge, isn't it? And we see with an awful lot of, and we see, I'm sure you have as well, in all of the companies you've worked with, sometimes people are really good at a job. So they're brilliant at, say, for example, being a nurse. And then all of a sudden there's a clinical deputy role available. And then what happens is they go, oh, well, you're a really good nurse, so you'll be a really good clinical deputy. But what we don't then do is dive in there and say, well, you're a really good nurse. What tools do you need in your bag to help you be a really good clinical deputy? And that's where further leadership coaching comes in. That's where the discussions come in about not always knowing everything, and where we see an awful lot of failure. Because we don't do that, people fail at that next level. They fail at that next level because they get scared. They go thinking, I need to know everything. I'm meant to know this. I have this title, so therefore that equals I have this knowledge. And it doesn't, does it? The two things don't go. A title doesn't equal knowledge. That's the same for every role. And I think that keeping that real with people and enabling people to say, okay, look, this is the trajectory you want to go on. This is where you want to get to. So what can we do to build you into that leader? And actually when, not if, when the imposter syndrome taps you on the shoulder, talk about it. Tell us what's going on at that point. You might panic. There might be team members who won't work with each other, for example. You set up a shift pattern, then these people come along and go, I don't want to work with her, or I don't like this. Then, okay, well, then they might panic and go, oh my God, I don't know how to handle this situation. That's when we as leaders need to engage and lean in and be a bit vulnerable and say, you know what, I remember that. I remember feeling scared. I remember the night team not wanting to speak to the day team and not quite knowing what the answer was, and actually have to sit down and work it through. So I think that vulnerability and being able to be honest about that, we have been through this and we're going to go through more of this. And it's interesting. A couple of weeks ago, I was writing up something for the new website for our care home company. And every evening I do just a small review of my day. It's part of my thing I learned a long time ago. Just review your day. I check every day whether I leave people whole or better that haven't been with me. me. That's something I learned again from another mentor, because I
Mm.
sometimes didn't do that early on in my career. I may go into a room and actually when I left, people didn't feel good. People didn't feel energized. They didn't feel inspired to continue. So now when I check my day and all my interactions and kind of go, yes, those people left whole. They left inspired to do what they needed to do, and they would want to come back in a room with me. It's hard work to do that, because sometimes I'll come alongside something and go, well, actually, that didn't quite go as planned. But I can then fix that and review that and make that work. And I think that because I do that, I hold me accountable, but I also hold me accountable to fix the error as well. So if I think an interaction with somebody didn't go quite as well as it could, that the person didn't learn what they needed to learn, and also actually I may have lost my message because of whatever reason, it just holds me accountable. And that accountability and vulnerability go hand in hand. And I think sometimes as leaders, we forget that, because to be truly accountable, we have to allow ourselves to review who we've been today, what we've achieved, and actually agree that maybe we didn't do what we needed to do or didn't achieve what we need to achieve. So it can be tough going, but it's important, I think.
Yeah, and tell me a little bit more about maybe a kind of character trait or person. Can you learn to be that? Can you learn, I guess, to show a bit more vulnerability? Do you think that people, have certain character traits? And by the way, I'm not making a finite assertion here that
Yeah,
anyone is
of
necessarily
course.
better than the other. I'm just as curious to know is that can people learn to move to show more vulnerability when it may not be their style and it may not be their preferred way of doing things, and they want to stick to the a
Yeah.
model and way that they've preferred?
And a
Your
particular
thoughts on that?
leadership style. I
Yeah.
get that. No, Adam, that's a good question, actually. I think we all have all of the styles. I think it's a pendulum. It's like a spectrum that kind of goes from one end to the other. When I started out in first management and then leadership, my style was very different. I
Mm,
have learned over the years what works for me, what works for the people I work with,
mm,
what gets the right results as well. So is somebody going to do a really good job if they feel good or if they
mm,
don't feel good? And really questioning that. So different styles and different situations require different styles as well. So
mm,
so you know,
mm,
so so if for example you have a situation where somebody's going through a disciplinary, for example,
mm,
it might not be that you go in and I think people see vulnerability and sometimes think wishy-washy or soft.
mm, mm,
That's not the case.
mm,
So
mm,
vulnerability is about me as a person. Wishy-washy and soft is a completely different thing. And I
mm,
think we need to kind of sort
mm,
what that is. But the different styles, I think, yes, you can learn them. I listen to a different book every week. So
mm,
I have Audible and I listen
mm,
to a different book every week. I'm currently
mm.
doing one that's driving me mad because there's loads of different exercises I need to do every day. But one that I found was really, really good was Simon Sinek's Know Your Why.
Okay.
That was a really good leadership book. And then he goes on to another book called Why Leaders Eat Last. Really good leadership work
Mm,
there. The other person, of course, is Brené Brown. She does an awful lot of work on vulnerability and leadership. And so I think it can be learned, but I think
mm,
we need to be seeking that learning and seeking that understanding. And I became an NLP master practitioner some years ago. So I think that also added a different side to me as well. So being a business coach and a master practitioner in NLP, that also leaves me, I must remain accountable for me,
mm,
but
mm,
also I need to use those different styles depending on who I'm coaching, what I'm doing, what we want out of this situation. But I
mm,
think the key for
mm,
me is vulnerability does not equal weakness.
mm,
Vulnerability equals strength. And so I would give it the best example would be a couple of times over the years where I've had to dismiss somebody and they
mm,
felt good. They felt okay. They felt actually the right decision was made here. And they
mm,
went on then to do what they wanted to do in the future. And other times where I've done appraisal, I did an appraisal with somebody a few years back who I could see was starting to dip in her role. You just see that little output just starting to dip, just starting to dip. And I said to her, are you not happy doing this? Is that what it is? Because I'm not seeing that passion anymore. I'm not. And she said to me, no, I don't like doing this anymore. I want to do, and she said what she wanted to do. So what we did was she went off, not worked for me. She resigned. She went off, got her master's in what she wanted to do and now is doing something completely different. So it doesn't always mean, even in difficult discussions, that you don't bring vulnerability with you. You don't need to bring softness with you or a lack of clarity as to where you are. But that vulnerability really shows accountability. And that's really what it is. It's about how does that person feel when they leave, and how do I leave them whole? And as a leader, I think especially in care, we have to do that.
And I think it's probably especially in care as well, because the main people that we rely on are people who are not paid a huge amount. Any way that you can find as a leader to make them happy and fulfilled and rewarded and appreciated. You're in the coalface here, I'm not, but I can only, from what I've seen, and those that I've spoken to, maybe the kind of styles that we're talking about here of leadership has a role in enabling. It gives you the
Definitely.
best chance.
It does. And then it goes back to, why Spring Up really exists, which is that PR, that face of your business. If your team member is happy, what impression are they going to make on a potential resident, a potential family member? If, for example, they've had an interaction with, say, me, and it hasn't been a pleasant interaction, that doesn't mean, by the way, I can still say to somebody, the way you approach that actually. And typically what I would say is, help me understand the approach you just took. Not why. I wouldn't say why. I never use the word why. So help me understand the approach you just took. That helps the person then explain where they were coming from in that approach, and then also sets a conversation around, well, actually, if I was doing that, I may have done this, this, or this. Instead of going in with, why did you say that? Which it's the same question, but can help somebody in a different way. So team members being happy, team members being content, and feeling as though what they say and how they feel is integral to the success of the business, everything. And that takes us as leaders standing there with them and really engaging with them and understanding from their perspective what we can do to support them.
That's really interesting. Now, one other question I have particularly on this is you touched on this accountability on yourself. So if something goes wrong, if someone
it does.
if someone does make a bad decision about where accountability and blame lies.
Interesting. Yes. I love that.
What its point is it that person, or is it you for hiring them?
I love that question. I love where you're going with this. We were literally talking about this earlier. This is so cool.
Now, I'm interested in your take on that.
I love it. Thank you. So interestingly, I'm on a WhatsApp group for quality directors, and we all meet every month. And last night we were talking about something like this. So where something goes wrong and can go awfully wrong, where does the accountability sit? And does the word blame come into it? So I would say take out the word blame. There's learning in everything. Take the word blame out. So I would say if there's anything as a leader we can do is to take away the word blame, because whatever happens is definitely learning. Could be big, huge learning, could be small learning, but there's definite learning. But ultimately, the accountability has to sit with the CEO. It always does, always will. But, for the outcome. But the real accountability comes after that. It's not about what went wrong. It's always about what we do about it. And it's always about how we respond. Something, and you've been around a lot of different care companies, things go wrong. Especially, from a PR perspective, there's a lot of times where you're trying to mitigate the impact of difficult PR. Things go wrong, and they will go wrong. For me, it's so important that we break that down together and we understand, okay, well, was this an individual that this just happened? All the processes, procedures, everything were in place, and it was something that was way out left field. None of us could have predicted this. Or is it actually we were missing some of the key areas that we needed to do? And so what we did, I set up at XL Care, and we'll do at Bracebridge as well, is we had monthly lessons learned labs where we actually talked openly about, say, complaint or a safeguarding that had happened. And we'd ask different home managers and different people to talk about them, because safeguarding scares people sometimes. Complaints scare people sometimes. So what we want to do is get people to share their experience of a safeguarding, sometimes very difficult ones, and share. But anybody could join that. It was on a webinar. It was on the Teams. Anybody can join from anywhere. So any team member, whether they cleaned the laundry room or rent a care home, could join into these. And the point of it was, there was two reasons. One is because we had to share the lessons that we'd learned from whatever happened.
So was this like a attend if you like kind of event?
No, everyone. So all regional directors were to attend, all home managers, all
Right.
deputies, then as many other people as possible. We would record it and send it out as well, so that
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
people could listen to it, because we wanted as many people in the company to listen to it as possible.
Yeah.
And once you do that, you see, then all of a sudden blame doesn't belong there, does it? Because actually we're talking about something that really, really went wrong, or something simple like somebody's complained about their cardigan being shrunk in the laundry. It can be something major or minor. But if you're sharing lessons learned, then blame doesn't come into it, because actually it's about what we learned from this. What are we going to do differently about this moving forward? And actually, is it preventable? If it is preventable, what do we need to do to prevent it? And if it wasn't preventable, how can we plan ahead to see how likely this is to happen again? And I think having a really open, honest conversations help all different people. So it helped me, obviously, but also helps all of the teams on there, because then it becomes very open and very transparent and kind of like, oh my God, that happened in that home. Okay, well, now we can learn from this. And I just think it shows an open and honest discussion about things that go wrong, rather than pointing the finger. And I know, I'm bless you, I'm talking too much, but my dad used to, I don't know if you can see that, my dad used to always say, when you're pointing this finger, where is this finger pointing? And it's always pointed right back at you. So I would say that would be for me, blame doesn't belong anywhere.
Another question I have, which is related, I guess, is for those colleagues, people who work together, who just cannot work together?
Okay, that's tough, isn't it? That's a tough one. And I asked this,
How to handle
how
that?
do you approach it? I think there are times where personalities clash, aren't there? And there's times where you can kind of get two different mindsets working together and they just do not gel. For me, when I've worked with people like this before, I've asked the people to go away and try and write down the good traits of the other person first before we come back in the room. So what is the other person good at? And then what we're seeing there is whether the person's open-minded enough to be able to see the good in the other person and what they can bring to the table or not. If you get somebody who comes back in a room and says, there's nothing good about that person, there's just nothing good, then actually you don't need to deal with both people. Now you've got one person to deal with. You've got one very closed mind person, can't see the strengths of another human being. Then we have to question, is that the right person? Are they the right people? But often when you do that, actually, when you give them time to go away and do that, they come back and go, well, actually, he's really good at this and he's really good at that. And then we actually often find the strength in the other person is I'm not going to use the word weakness, but is the development area in the person that doesn't quite like them. And actually that causes a discomfort in the person. So how do we actually get them to share skills, share knowledge, and actually take time to check in with each other that they're okay? Then you can move that forward. But the first thing to do is go away and ask them to write separate lists on all of the strengths of the other person, because we need to see who we're dealing with. Are we dealing with somebody who does want to learn, who's on the learning pathway, because we're always on that, or are we with somebody who's very stuck and rigid and doesn't want to change?
Yeah, very interesting. Samantha, is there anything that we've not covered up to now that you feel that you just would like to mention?
No, I don't think so. I think it's been really, I love doing these as well because it helps me think as well. I love these things because it always helps you think, doesn't it?
Yeah, of course.
But I think for me, the key is just to remember that being vulnerable is your biggest strength as a leader. And that doesn't mean being weak. It means being real and staying real. And read Simon Sinek's books. They're amazing.
That's great. And thank you very much. And finally, Samantha, if anyone wants to reach out and maybe ask you something, how can they do that?
So they can contact me on Samantha.Crawley at bracebridgecare.org. They can find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, anywhere really. Yeah, any place at all you can get hold of me.
Samantha, thank you so much for being our guest on the Care CEO Success Stories podcast.
No problem. Thank you.